You are live. You are live. Okay, you are live. ಏನಾದ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊ. ನಾನು ಲೈನಲ್ಲೇ ಇರೋ ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆ.
Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Yeah,
Girish,
go
am
ahead.
I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Dr. Puneet, welcome you all for this webinar on topic veterinary disease investigation. Dr. Girish BC, sorry, Dr. Giri, Dr. Girish sir, Dr. Girish BC completed his BVSc in US, Bangalore, MVSc in Department of Pathology, US, Bangalore, PS Veterinary University, Tirupati. He has completed DABT, means toxicology, like diplomat exam from American Board of He has pursued PG diploma in communicative English and PG diploma in agricultural extension management from Manage Hyderabad. He worked as scientist in Reddy's Laboratory, Hyderabad, also worked as principal scientist and associate scientist and associate Biocon Research Limited, Bangalore, prior to joining the university as assistant professor in 2012. Currently working in Department of Pathology, Assam. He had published more than 35 articles in international and national journals and presented more than 60 papers in national and international conferences. He has been awarded with 10 gold medals during BVSc graduation. He is also bestowed with several awards such as Best Student Award from JNV, Pratibha Shri Award and Best Oral Presentation Award and Best Presentation Award. He is editorial board member of SAGE and currently serving as DBT nominee in several scientific and ethical committees. Heartily welcome you, sir, on behalf of Student Alumni Association, Hassan Veterinary College, and we are eagerly waiting for your talk. The session is yours, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Puneet.
Thank you, sir.
I hope I am audible. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay, so very good evening to everyone. Many of my students I can see in the Google Meet, budding veterinarians. So actually, first of all, I would like to thank the Alumni Student Association. It's a unique approach. So because we were all handicapped because of this lockdown situation due to Corona. And these guys, they came out with an idea of having a webinar so that the teachers, students, and even the practicing veterinarians can have a platform to interact. So first of all, on behalf of the college, so I would like to congratulate and I would like to thank the alumni, some of the students who actively organized this. And I will straight away move on to my presentation. One can see this my PPT slide. See, all that I would like to talk in today's discussion actually is, don't think that knocking back to your UG days and boring you. And my intention is not that. See, many of you already would have completed your post-graduation, those who have from a veterinary college, Hassan. Many of you might have already practicing as a young budding veterinarian. So when you grow up, when you are practicing veterinarian, what happens generally, we tend to give more emphasis on the clinical approach. So because we have to treat the cases, hurdles also people who are working in the government setup. And we are tending, it's customary, I'm not blaming anybody, it happens even for this, we tend to forget or ignore some of the very basic paraclinical topics. And we tend to end up in problems. That's the reason for a practicing veterinarian, and I would like to tell again that this is not going to be an elaborative and exhaustive research applications or the recent advances. I don't want to do that. That will be taken care in a different platform. But my intention here is to make you familiar with a very basic fundamental disease diagnosis. Hope you understand and enjoy this session. Okay, the topic of today's discussion is veterinary disease investigation. And some of field intended. Hello?
Sir, excuse me. Sir, please share your presentation, sir.
Unable to see? I will share it again. One second.
Okay.
Okay, one second. I hope you this PPT presentation, the first slide. Hello?
Hello.
No, sir, still it is.
Unable to see the PPT. Okay, so maybe because of
Sorry.
overload.
You can start, sir. You can
Okay, you
start.
can.
But can okay, so okay.
Sir, go ahead. Go ahead, sir. The
Okay.
session is yours.
But can you see the PPT slide? How it will take
Yeah,
some
Yes,
more-
sir.
You can see the PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, so I welcome you all again. So my intention here is, I'll repeat, is not to bore you with the academic knowledge which we teach inside the class. This is actually something which we gained out of our experience, because I also have worked as a scientist in several organizations. How best we can diagnose a case and what is the importance of it? How a veterinarian can play a pivotal role. So it's not just sending the samples. So the veterinarian or the field doctor is the central point of diagnosis. So when we are investigating case, I'll start with the epidemiological approach. You would have been told in the epidemiology class also, the best, whenever there is an outbreak of a disease, you are called. You are called as a team, a pathologist, an epidemiologist, a microbiologist, and even a parasitologist and a toxicologist also to investigate a case. And for animal, wherever there is an outbreak, a veterinarian, so you are the first point, where you would have seen the case, you would have treated the animal, you are unable to understand the case, so that's why you need investigation for the same case. In such situation, the basically starts with an epidemiological approach. So there are some 10 steps which you have already studied in your, and how best you are going to diagnose a case, what best approaches you are going to do, how best you are going to interact with the farmer, interact with the people around the case, and how you are going to communicate this with the scientists, what samples are you going to submit for the laboratory, how are you going to do this, and what is your role as a veterinarian. So this is what we have studied in epidemiology. Whenever we are investigating an outbreak of a disease, about outbreak of a disease is not a case, it's not one or two animals, it is a flock which is affected. So you want to understand the diagnosis, you want to understand what's wrong with it. It's not just the diagnosing the case, you have to also identify the source of the problem. So suppose there is a toxicity, you have to understand. So what is the water source, or is there a feed source? That's how it is coming in the way of causing the diagnosis. Defining the case, determining the magnitude of the problem, comparing the affected and the unaffected, and also comparing the frequency of the disease that is existing, and also the frequency of the disease which is seen when you have been asked to investigate the outbreak. And describing the temporal pattern of we refer temporal means which refers to the time. See, from how many days these animals are suffering, during whatever the animals are getting the fever, months they are suffering. So that is the time. So, or if it is a chronic case, even for months together they may be suffering. Describe the spatial pattern of the new cases. So this is very essential, just a few words I am telling. Suppose if there is an outbreak of a disease, you just define the microenvironment, whether this happened in a particular location surrounding a pond, whether this happened surrounding the agricultural crops. So all this matters when you have to define. Describe the of new cases. You describe from the point of an animal. How many animals are affected? What age is susceptible? Which breed is more susceptible? Whether the male, female, any difference is there? What species of animals? Whether the lactating animals are suffering or the pregnant animals are suffering. So and after this, you have to analyze the data. So several pages of data which has to be analyzed. So which has to be made into a frequency table. We have to make a hypothesis, which is the next point. Formulate a working hypothesis. That means based on this, based on your diagnosis, based on the laboratory diagnosis, based on the history, based on the clinical science, on the response to the treatment, you have to come out with a working hypothesis. What may be wrong with these animals? And compare it with the established facts which are published in the form of literature. Go back to your textbooks, go back to the articles, and compare your finding with the existing findings, and prepare a written report of the detailed investigation, including the postmortem, including the laboratory investigation. Finally, you have to come with the final conclusion, which I am going to tell you. So you are going to make this final conclusion based on your finding, based on the lab finding. And what is derived out of this? That is final, right? What is drawn out of this? What message are you going to give to the society? What message are you going to give to the farmer, the animal owner, in order to prevent this in the future days. So that means the prevention and the control measures. So because I am a diagnostician, I will talk about diagnosis. See, because I talk about the treatment, but I am a paraclinician, I am a pathologist, so I talk about diagnosis. Even in the classes I tell. So you know this, right? The diagnosis is half the, even in the medical practice, which is an age-old saying. But in the year 1980, so there was a published article from Brody and Waters who say diagnosis is treatment. That means the diagnosis is not half the treatment itself, it is a treatment. A diagnostic process not only paves the way for treatment, but also as a type of treatment itself. So you have to understand this. So before treating, before clinically interfering, so you have to correctly know the correct disease or the diagnosis of the disease or the etiology of the disease. So what is this? What you have to remember out of this? A doctor treating a patient, diagnosing the disease is no way better than a paravet. So that's why in the field what's happening in the veterinary field. Every person is a doctor who goes and touches an animal, including artificial inseminators, some of the paravets. So everybody is called as a doctor. In babesiosis, in some of the hemoprotozoan diseases, we get this portfine appearance of the liver. So this is a portfine appearance in the urinary bladder, the coloration of the urine. So this is the portfine. This is how the intense the congestion that happens because of this hemoglobin which is there in the urine. Pulpy kidney is very common in case of enterotoxemia. We say the pulpy kidney disease is not a lesion, rather it is an early autolytic changes that happens because of the enzymatic activity. So immediately if you open the animal which is suspected to have died of enterotoxemia, you will get the pulpiness. This is because of the autolysis. It is not a lesion. It is actually a very fast autolysis that is happening in an animal died of ET. Abomasal ulcer, which we see in case of filaria. So we talk about the punched out ulcers in the abomasum, which is characteristic in filaria. So these are the things which you can do at the field level, even without the need of any microscope. So that's why I tell our eyes are the best microscopes, and we are, as a veterinarian, we are the best diagnostician because we are getting the first information about an animal. If you do not open an abomasum, you are definitely going to miss this lesion. So you have to do a scientific examination. Histiocytosis and the pimply gut. So these are the parasitic conditions. So this is the moraco-leather appearance we say in case of esophagostomum, and also this is the pimply gut appearance because of this is the esophagostomum and this is the histophagia where we call it as moraco-leather appearance. White muscle disease, which is because of the selenium deficiency, you are seeing this is the cut portion of the heart showing the whitish areas because of the necrosis. And FMD lesions, you are well aware of this. You just open the mouth, you see what is whether it is lacerated, whether it is ulcer, whether there is vesicle, so surrounding the dental, the dental pad. So you can document this in a descriptive way. So some of the diseases, you are aware of this. I wanted to brush up. So this is the PPR lesion where you see in PPR we get the very classical the large intestinal hemorrhages which are similar to or analogous with the zebra markings which we see in the rinderpest. So these are the oral ulcers and also profuse salivation. And the sheeppox, in case of this, these are the vesicular and the papillary lesions surrounding the oral cavity and also on the skin. Lesions in the poultry, so again here also some of the metabolic diseases like ascites, gout, pneumonia, multifocal hemorrhages in fall cholera, and this is the proventricular hemorrhages, and this is the Clostridial infection where the bird will be swollen due to stress. In case of they're highly susceptible for stress, which leads to gastric ulcers. And the response of the lymph nodes, so that can also be documented. And this is one interesting case, which we had documented in a large animal. So with the animal, after applying the traction, the animal had a dystocia, and it was, I can hear some noise. If you please mute yourself, I can hear some noise, I cannot talk. It's a request for all the audience, kindly mute your phones. So this is a case, where we are seeing, this is actually the fetus, this is the uterus, inside which we are seeing the almost an 8.5 months old fetus. And this is when we investigated, there was a rupture in this area, the uterine artery rupture. So we could conclude that during the application of the traction, So there was a rupture of the uterine artery. So having studied these lesions, because I am a pathologist and in a post-mortem, so most of the situation, even in investigations done by the veterinarians. So there are some tips for writing the post-mortem. Many of the doctors, they call me, sir, this is what I'm seeing, how can I interpret this? How can I write the interpretation, inference? What lesion shall I write? So well, I want to give a few hints for writing the post-mortem. So always try to, so first don't directly jump to the diagnosis. So always think of the lesions. The document completely open the animal. So we have taught what is the position, whether it is the right sided or the left sided. In case of bovines, it should be left side down. In case of horses, it should be right side down. And the ventral recumbency for the poultry. So these things have been told already. So whenever you are doing a post-mortem, you give emphasis on the external examination, rigor mortis situation. If there is any wound, you describe the wound, and be clear in your point, and don't use ambiguous language. You just use very simple English, even if it is not pathology. You are seeing a reddish area, a eroded area on the surface of the skin, you write it down. Surrounding the anus, you write it down. So very simple English, very simple pathology, which we have studied in the gross general pathology, can be used. And people ask me for, what lesion shall I write? How to describe this lesion? You go to any pathology textbook, systemic pathology textbook, for every organ will get, lot of lesions. You can just go back to that, refer them and write. Or you want, just a crisp, just 2 or 3 lines, the important lesions. You go to a textbook, under diagnosis, you will have, pathology, gross pathology, just 1 paragraph. Just read it, you will get some important salient features, like say thylaria, we are going to see the button ulcers in the abomasum. So very simple points like that, you can get it. And accept the limitation. So sometimes, everything cannot be diagnosed. So you definitely need the help of a laboratory. So for which, so you can write, the sample has been submitted to the laboratory. What I have is only the tentative diagnosis. Final diagnosis will be made after the post-mortem, after the laboratory report comes to you. And never forget to look in for the pathognomonic lesions, because pathognomonic, instead of tentative diagnosis, you can give confirmatory diagnosis. So based on your pathology knowledge, for example, a young calf having myocardial infarction, so is a very pathognomonic in case of FMD, or the granulomatous nodules in tuberculosis, granulomas in different organs, intestinal corrugations in Jones disease, so very classical pathognomonic lesions. This should be kept in your mind. And correlate with the history and clinical science. You always should keep in your mind, the history has to be collected even before opening the animal. You should have a request by the competent authority or even by the farmer. And sometimes, you have some doubts in your mind as what shall I write? So in such situation, it is accepted to use could be, it might be suggestive of, right? Probably, it is indicative of, most likely. These are all accepted while writing the postmortem report. Okay, remember, try to take some snaps of the organs, lesions, and the procedures. So why I'm telling, you people, in a hurry, I understand, I'm not, blaming you again. Because, you have to say several cases, there is some call from your superior officer, you have to do so many things. So in such situation, so you tend to forget. So if it is a medical legal case, or if you're doing a post-mortem investigation of a forest, like a wild animal, or a captive animal, or for which a case an FIR has been filed, always try to take a snap of a photo of you examining the animal and also different organs. Keep it with you. So this will be useful in your later part. Somebody can question you, lawyer or an advocate or even the judge. So you can always say, sir, this is the proof. This is what I have done. This is the examination. This is the detail. So that's why I have the confidence for issuing this report. So that will serve you. That will help you in your in the future days. Under extreme conditions, this is possible. You are called. There is a big flood, and you have to do an examination. You have to do postmortem investigation of some animal. And you are at danger, suppose, or it's very difficult. You have hardly 5 minutes of time or 10 minutes. How to do a postmortem investigation? You have to do a thorough postmortem investigation, but under extreme conditions, at least that is the last resort, you examine the vital organs and the target organs. So just don't issue a report without doing a postmortem investigation, without opening the animal. You are not supposed to give a report. So it is the ethics and also as per the law. Okay, so once you have done the postmortem investigation, now you have to do a laboratory investigation. You have to send the samples. I will come back to some of the simple tests which can be done at the field levels. So before that, so now the postmortem has been done. You have some kidney and send it to the lab. Just diagnose the condition, will not serve the purpose. That is not correct also. Because we cannot do all the tests as a laboratory scientist. You have to think about at least you streamline. When you make a tentative diagnosis, it could be tuberculosis, it could be myocarditis or something. Just 2 or 3. At least come back to an infectious disease or toxicity, or you want a virological investigation. You just narrow down to a specific investigation that is needed. And what biological materials have to be submitted. Whether you are going to collect the stomach contents, whether you are going to collect the liver or the lungs, nasal secretion, urine, feces, blood, clotted blood, EDTA or heparin, whichever. So what biological material that you should keep in your mind. What fixatives or preservatives have to be. So this is another problem because because of a confusion after several years of service. So what happens? We have that confusion. I have seen some of the veterinarians. So this is my experience. It's a request for all of you. At least keep what preservative has to be kept. I have seen people sending a sample of liver in normal saline for histopathological investigation after 15 days. The moment I open the bottle cap, so it will be foul smelling. Sometimes I have seen for the microbiological investigation, people sending it in NBF. So you have to understand what is the right fixative, what is the right preservative. Which laboratory has to be contacted? So all these have to be decided by the veterinarian. So as an investigator, you are the center of investigation. Can you perform some simple tests in the hospital? Obviously, yes, he or she can. That's what, some tests which can be very easily done at the field level. You have forgotten. Many of the veterinarians have forgotten. It's the right time to refresh yourself and do those tests. So what are all the details that has to be furnished with the sample? Just sending a bottle without labeling is not correct, because I'm not aware of this. Who is a scientist sitting in a laboratory? What are the details that can be sent along with the sample is listed here. You have to send the veterinarian's name and also the mobile number, the owner's details, animal details, species, breed, sex, age, what clinical signs you have documented. If you have done the postmortem, you have done the tentative diagnosis, you can include even the PM report. Previous treatments, response to the treatment can also be captured, and time of recurrence, morbidity, mortality, all this, and details of the sample sent along with the preservative. I'm sending a sample of the liver and kidney. I'm sending a sample for the gastric content. I'm sending the sample of intestinal content, the feces, blood. So whatever, you just write it down. You can attach a communication or a letter along with the sample. So what are all the different laboratory investigations we do? I'm just going to tell very briefly about this. Say histopathology, have to send it in 10% formalin, formalin, zinc solution, and NBF. So people may ask, in my hospital I don't have formalin, so what can I do? So as see, it is required as a veterinarian. You have to keep at least on half a liter of concentrated formalin, or even 100 ml of formalin. You dilute it 1:10 with regular tap water. So that is the last resort. So if you have 100 ml, you can make 1 liter out of this 10% formalin. You just fill it in a bottle. And how to fill this in a bottle? The simple steps. If the bottle is like this, so the thumb of rule is 10 to 20 times the fixative has to be used. Suppose this is 1 liter bottle. So 1 liter bottle in terms of volume, around 100 ml of the tissue can be kept. It means around 10% of this. So rest all should be filled with the fixative. And you should also keep it in your mind, the sample size should be very small. It's not just keeping half of kidney directly into the formalin, because the fixative has to penetrate deep into the tissue, deep into the organ. So what you have to do, you have to slice them into very small pieces, small cubes of 1 centimeter into 1 centimeter, very small cubes. And you have to insert into these bottles. And whenever you are taking this sample, so what you have to do, suppose you are examining, I'll take the example of a liver. Liver, there are healthy areas, there are areas which are having some lesion. Suppose there is an infarction. You collect a small piece from the infarction area and also another piece from the healthy area, so that it becomes easy for us to compare, okay, this is liver, what is actually collected. And never freeze the samples. It's not required, don't freeze the samples, because the ice crystals are going to damage the tissue. And for bacteriology, again, don't use the fixate. We are coming back to bacteriology. You want to understand, you are suspecting for some bacteria like anthrax or HS or even BQ, which is an anaerobe. Now you have to think from the angle of the microbiology. Use the sterile vials. Okay, that is very essential. And do not use the fixate. You don't put it in the NBF, which is not required. And also maybe you're going to kill the bacteria, which has to be isolated or has to be cultured. And sometimes what you can do is heat fixing of the impression smear. There is a pus, you want to understand what bacteria are there. You can take the impression smear from this and you can heat fix like we do for the gram stain, and you can send the slide. That is also accepted. And for the anaerobes, you have to use anaerobic media like thioglycolide broth, the Roberts and Bullacott media. If nothing is available, you have to use an airtight sterile syringe. You have to aspirate the fluid. And if you are studying the milk samples, so all these 4 quarters have to be separated and it has to be labeled, whether it's right front quarter, right left quarter, the front left quarter, front right quarter. So you have to label which quarter you want to investigate. And for mycology, the fungal infection is almost similar to bacteria, so there is no need of using any fixatives. And skin scrapings can also be sent along with 10 to 15 plucked hair if you are suspecting for ringworm infection or the dermatophilus infection. And use sterile vials and milk samples for fungal mastitis. Again, quarter-wise separately they have to be collected. And for virology, so what you have to do is one second, I'm just. That is another thing which we will be discussing in this hematology. See, when you are collecting the blood, again we have, so I'm not talking about the fresh graduates, some doctor's problem, whether this has to be collected in EDTA or it has to be collected in heparinized vials. Very simple for hematology when you want to investigate RBCs, W. So very simple when you want to investigate RBCs, WBCs, DLCs. So you have to collect this in EDTA of 1 to 2 ml. For hematology, we need a very small amount of blood, 2 to 2 ml. And this has to be properly mixed. So I just, I wanted to show some of the farmers also who do this on their own. So there is an anticoagulant inside. What you have to do is just tap this. Okay, the anticoagulant spreads equally, and there is a mark here. So this already. So once it reaches this level, so you can slowly invert this, not very fast. So you cannot do rigorously like this. Slowly invert this so that it properly gets mixed with the anticoagulant. And for the sake of biochemical analysis for the enzymes or the renal profile as creatinine, burn, or the hepatic function test, you have to collect 5 to 10 ml of the blood in heparinized vials, or the 2 to 4 ml of serum or the plasma. And again, we have to, if you are collecting the blood sample, you have to properly mix it. Sometimes we need the confirmation of the disease. So for which you need to send it for PCR. So even you must be knowing COVID-19, we are doing PCR confirmation, RT-PCR, because the virus is an RNA virus. You have to use the sterile vials and do not use the fixatives. Use just as if you are sending the sample to a bacteriological investigation. You have to use a clean sterile vial. So that's it. And you have to collect the right sample. So which organ is affected based on the pathogenesis, whether it's multiplying in the liver, whether there is a septicemia or whether there is a viremia. So you have to collect the blood. Or if there is nephritis, you have to collect the kidneys. Depending upon which organ is affected, you have to collect the sample. And for parasitic investigation, sometimes for mites like scabies and the mite infestation, you have demodicosis. So skin scrapings have to be sent in 10% potassium hydroxide. And for the hemoprotozoans, for Babesia, Anaplasma, which is again a bacteria, but doesn't matter, it's also for it affects the blood. Okay, So Babesia and Theileria, so for which you have to send the blood, whole blood with an anticoagulant, or it can be even the blood smear fixed in the methanol is also fine. And fecal sample in a clean and dry vial under refrigeration. Okay, so on the whole parasite, suppose you are doing a postmortem, you want to understand what parasite is this inside the intestine or even any organ. So you have to collect the sample and you can send it in 70% alcohol. For electron microscopic examination, the case may arise, it may not be a routine practice. During your career, in your service, you may find a day when you may have to do an electron microscopic examination. You have to collect the fresh sample as much as possible, and 2.5 to 3% glutaraldehyde in phosphate buffer saline. So that is the fixative. And this glutaraldehyde, we get, even for 100 rupees also, but that's not the glutaraldehyde I'm telling. It has to be labeled as electron microscopic grade or EM grade, which is a bit costlier, or you can contact to any laboratories like us to help you. And use sterile vials, make the tissues into very small pieces. For histopathology, 1 centimeter cube I told. For electron microscopy, it should be a very tiny piece of 1 millimeter cube. For toxicological investigation, it should be fresh as fresh as possible. And deep freezer can also be used, refrigerator and frozen tissue, frozen samples. And preservatives are better to avoid, but some situation where it has to go for a longer duration, you can use some preservatives like 95% ethanol at 1 ml per gram of tissue, or saturated salt solution. But in your the letter which is going to accompany the sample, you have to clearly define the preservative use this so and so. So because the investigator, the analyst will have in his mind. So this is what the preservative is, what kind of interaction it can have with any of the chemical or the investigative parameter. And plastic bags and jars are better. Plastic, you can keep it in an envelope, and that can be kept within the thermocol box instead of keeping it in glass jars. And do not wash the samples before packing. So you have a sample of gastric contents, if they are foul smelling because of some poisoning, don't wash it and send it. So it has to be exactly what you are seeing at the postmortem situation. Approximate sample volume, you can find this in any of the veterinary laboratory diagnostic books or even in toxicology books. So I just don't want to get into this. So about 100 to 500 gram of gastric contents, liver, brain, kidneys, even feed we have to collect for some toxicological investigation is better, because the source of toxin may be feed, maybe water, which is present in the immediate vicinity. So that can also be useful in investigation. Some of the chronic toxicity like arsenic, so the poison is going to tend to accumulate in the hair. So in such situation, hide, hair, and even some sample, even a few pieces of the skin can also be kept. Okay, so this is about the sample shipment, the second portion. So remember, so there are several organs, what organ I have to collect. If you are having this doubt, keep, at least you remember this sentence. Organs or organ to be collected is mostly the organ affected, plus the excretion or the secretion. You know what organ will be affected. Suppose in hemorrhagic septicemia, you know that there is trachea is going to be affected, lungs are going to be affected based on your pathology and medicine knowledge. So you remember, so these organs have to be collected. So that is compulsory. Or we are talking about cecal coccidiosis in poultry. So you know very well what sample has to be collected. It is the organ that is affected. So with this knowledge, I'll move on to the last component, which I will take another 5-10 minutes at the most. So what are these simple field-oriented tests? So I keep on talking with many of the doctors. So when you send the sample to some laboratory, just you are forgetting that a veterinarian is also a diagnostician. You have the knowledge of pathology, you know about microbiology, you know about parasitology, virus. You have been taught. Only thing is you are not using it. Some of these tests can be arranged with spending just hardly 5,000 rupees. Some of the reagents, you can talk to your superior officers or talk to some of the donors who can just give this material, sponsor this material, and can be arranged in your hospital or wherever you are working. So I made this list of this simple tests which can be done. You have to do a cytology, you have to make arrangement for cytology with simple stains like Giemsa traits. For cytology, you need a glass slide, a stain box. Now this is the Giemsa box, Giemsa bottle, which requires hardly 30 to 35 minutes with 5 minutes of fixation using methanol and 20 to 30 minutes of Gymsharp. And so this can be very easily done. Hardly you need one stain like this. And right stain, you can complete the staining procedure in just 5 minutes. You just go back to your pathology book and test. Check this. The right stain can be done as simple as within 5 minutes, without even a fixative. A fixative is included within right stain. And you need a simple microscope. A simple microscope. I'm not talking about lakhs of rupees. A simple microscope. Basic student version is 8 to 10,000. And most of the hospitals, they have this microscope. Only thing is we are not using it. And the second thing is a qualitative biochemical test, like Rother's test. We talk about ketosis. We talk about diabetes, where the glucose levels are increased. In enterotoxemia, there is glycemia, glucosuria. So we have kept those in the textbooks and the notes itself. So why can't we do a simple Benedict's test in the field? Hardly you need a Benedict's reagent, and which is it's not very costly. It's a very cheap reagent, and you need something to boil it. You need 1 or 2 test tubes. So that's all you need. And lateral flow based kits, some of the kits are available. A simple example for this lateral flow based kits, which made a revolution in human medicine, is a simple pregnancy test, what people are using. So you need not have to apply a leave. You must have seen in the advertisement, owner talking to her servant or the housemaid saying that they don't apply leave. So you just hardly need 50 rupees for this pregnancy test. The similar tests are available, some kits are available. And we are using some of these kits for the diagnosis of PPR in our college. Just a second.
Sir, 5 minutes.
Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay. Okay, patient test, lateral test, take fecal examination, use strip test. I will come this picture. Mastitis, simple testing. With the help of the detergent powder. So we can do these tests simply can be done in the hospitals. So this is what I was talking about, the cytology for the examination of the cells. So hardly you need stain, 1 stick, and one microscope. Even the simple microscope is there. And these are the simple qualitative tests. Sometimes there is any quantitative test based on the color changes, Rother's test, and even the benzene test. So they can be escalation or hospitals. And this is what we do for the diagnosis of Newcastle disease in our laboratory. This is a part of my PhD also. So the colitis flags have to collect it. We have a kit. We have to load this sample after mixing this with the diluent, which is supplied with the kit. So when after applying, you have to keep this aside for 2 to 3 minutes or maximum 5 minutes, and you are going to see this color bands. So based on which you can see the reactive reaction. On the right side, you have the treatment, which is the positive reaction. If you are not seeing the control line even in a negative sample, that means you are having diagnosis of this with the help of fingers, slight agglutination test for salmonella. Left side is positive, the right side is negative. And this is a very simple test. This is the one urine strip test, deep stick. So you take, I wanted to show this. This is what it appears like. You just stick like the urine. And you have to compare this with the D test which are available here. It's a very simple test. Based on which you can see the ketosis level quantitatively, pH of this, presence of nitrate, protein, so and this will not cost too much also. This is around 1,200 or 1,300 per 100. So this will cost around maximum 13 rupees to 14 rupees. So which is, I think, even a farmer has to pay this much of money. And this is so they are aware of this. So based on the pH, or if you don't have the reagent, just keep the pH papers, because all this are based on the alkaline side changes which happen with the pH. So instead of doing all this tests, you can just keep a pH paper and dip it in the milk and see the pH. So that based on it, you can know mastitis. Okay, so with this, to come to the last slide. The role of the veterinarian. in disease investigation is crucial, active, and not the scientist and not the diagnostician, a veterinarian who is the prima facie of the case, with the prima facie of the outbreak of the disease. You are the major contributor in the investigation. And diagnosis is treatment. So don't think that, say, I just jumping into treatment. So actual treatment relies upon the proper diagnosis. Once you are diagnosing the condition, the treatment becomes extremely easy. And scientific post-mortem investigation is mandatory for any investigation and even for the collection of the samples, and collect the right biological sample, ship it in the right way to just, hardly it matters. Just go back to your fundamental science, what material, what disease has to be investigated, and select the right biological sample. Employ simple field-based tests, just before sending the sample to the laboratory, what can I do in my hospital based on the materials which I use. Some of the tests which I showed, a simple field-oriented test can be very easily done at the hospital level. And I always tell my students and even the veterinarians, the veterinary job is highly versatile field. You have to deal with so many species, wild animals, laboratory animals.
Hello? Hello, sir? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Are you audible, sir? Hello? Hello? Girish sir, are you audible?
Hello, sir.
Hello?
Hello,
I
sir.
think
Are you audible?
he lost his connection.
Hello, Girish sir. Are you audible?
ಏನಾಯ್ತು ಸರ್ ಹೋಯ್ತು ನಿಮ್ಮದು ಸರ್ ಓಕೆ ಲಾಗಿನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಬೇಗ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸರ್ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ
Hello?
ಓಕೆ
There is
ಸರ್
a technical glitch.
ಲಾಗಿನ್ ಕೊಡು ಸರ್ ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ನೋಡು ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ಕೊಡು
ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ
ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ
ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬಂದಿರುತ್ತೆ.
ಹಾಂ
Hello? Girish sir, are you audible?
Hello?
Girish sir?
Hello?
Hello?
ಸರ್ ರೀಜನ್ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಯ್ತಾ ಸರ್ ಹಾಂ ಓಕೆ ಸರ್ ಹಾಂ ಓಕೆ ಸರ್ ಹಾಂ ಬನ್ನಿ ಸರ್
Hello?
Hello. Girish sir.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Sir.
Hello sir, are you audible sir?
So there was some problem. This got disconnected. Had some problem. Okay.
Okay, no issue sir. We'll quickly move on to the question answer session sir.
Okay, so that's about the presentation. Thank you very much for patient hearing. So if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Okay, sir. There is a question from Tabiba Banu. The question is,
Okay.
sir, how to differentiate at field level to differentiate viral, bacterial, and parasitic diseases?
Okay, so how are you going to decide, what investigation, whether it is bacterial, viral, or parasitic, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes sir.
Okay, so this question, you have to decide based on your knowledge. So how to do it? Suppose, you are doing a post-mortem investigation. That's why I told you, you have to sit with the complete data, at least in a few points. What clinical signs you have seen, what is the temperature of the animal, what was the clinical manifestation, convulsion, whether the animal had diarrhea. Okay, so whether this animal had any other kind of ailments, and what are the pathological lesions, what you have seen during post-mortem examination. You sit with all these points, and you will come back to, you feel that it could be an infectious disease, and you cannot differentiate whether it's bacteria or virus. So in such situation, you have to investigate from the angle of both bacteria and also virus. Okay, so it can be a combination of one or two.
So the next.
Okay, fine. So you will decide whether it's metabolic, infectious, or nutritional, and then you decide. So
Okay, sir. There is another question from Mohit Sri Delugu. His question is, in private practice, can we do post-mortem? Does our report have any value?
Okay, good question. Okay, so in a private, you are a private practitioner, you have to issue a post-mortem report. So this is, I tell you, see, from the point of science, from the point of scientific investigation, you can do it. But you have to take this report for some official procedures. So then you need a signature from an officer. In such situation, as a private practitioner, from the point of science, it is yes. But you need this report for some official purpose, for claiming something. So in such situation, it's better you have this from an officer, like a veterinary officer, who is a government officer. So it will be better. But for the sake of investigation, from the scientific investigation, for example, even in poultry, right, the person should be a basic veterinary graduate. That itself is enough. Understood?
Okay, sir. Okay. So the next question is from Prajakta. His question is, sir, can we use tap water or borewell water for making 10% formalin?
Who is asking this question?
Prajakta.
Okay. Prajata, okay. So good question. See, always, you have to prepare 10% formalin. You have concentrated formalin. You have to dilute it 1:9. So then only it becomes 10% formalin. You look for, the best water source will be distilled water. Suppose you don't have distilled water, you always go for at least the filtered water. If you don't have filtered water, you use soft water. Even for tap water is fine, but it should be soft water.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Another question is from Mohit C. Didiku. His question is, what about canine and feline disease investigation or diagnosis?
Okay, Mohit. So this is actually, I was given 30 minutes of time. So it's very difficult to cover everything. So I understand. I will give you one last justification for this. I had asked the same question to Stromberg, Dr. Stromberg, who was the vice president of the American College of Veterinary Pathology in 2006 in Pune. Sir, there are so many species, how to deal with the species? So we are so much confused when we are doing investigation. Now I will tell this, I will keep on telling this to my students also. Whenever you are practicing in the field, because of this species, you always think a rat is a small elephant and elephant is a big rat. Hope I answered your question. So there's a lot of similarities between different species. So whenever you are confused, you think that all these are animals at least. Okay, so there's the diseases of dogs and cats. Just to brush through the diseases of dogs and cats, definitely it will give you some idea how to go ahead. Okay?
So there is one more question from YouTube. Wait, sir. One second, sir.
So can I ask, they are receiving some messages here. Shilpa Balaji.
The question is EDTA blood interfere with size of RBC?
Is EDTA interfere with size of RBCs? Okay. So many of these see, many of these anticoagulants like EDTA or sodium fluoride, many of these anticoagulants have to be used at the right level, say 0.2 ppm at 20 microns per ml. So this will be defined in the textbooks or in the manuals. Whenever you are using excess of this, right, whether it is EDTA or any anticoagulant, definitely it is going to hamper your diagnosis by interfering with many of the parameters. Not only size of RBCs or something like that. So it has to be used at the right dose. So whenever the correct dose is not used, you are going to end up in trouble. So it's going to have some cremations in the RBC, some kind of artifacts. So you better go with the right proportion, the advice, the suggested, the values. So have to be implemented.
Okay, sir. This is the time for session ending. Okay, sir. Sometimes veterinarians in the field will find difficult in diagnosing a disease, and now and then, like many diseases will go unnoticed. Okay, Dr. Girish BC has made this problem trouble-free by sharing his valuable information which he has gained through his entire life, and it is really a wonderful seminar or webinar. Thank you, sir. It was really wonderful and informative presentation.
Okay.
Hope it helps all veterinarian fields, UG, PG, PhD students. Thank you all. Hope we will meet again. Until now, be happy, always smile. Thank you, sir.
One second.
On YouTube.
Okay, so I'm sharing my phone number now. So if you have any questions, you can directly contact me, because there are several questions asked by the students and directly by messages.
Okay,
I cannot answer all of these questions. You can contact me through my phone number. That's okay. I'm most welcome for your questions. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
You can share your number, sir.
I sent an SMS. I've shared a message here in the chat section.
In the chat box. Okay.
966330368. 966330368. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you. ಹೇಳು
ನೋಡಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಏನಪ್ಪ ಇದು ಬೆಳಕು ಬರ್ತದಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಗೊತ್ತೇ ಹೋಯ್ತು ಮೇಲೆ